Time for this.
In a conventional mine, uranium-bearing rock is dug up from open-cut pits or underground tunnels. It's trucked to uranium mills where it is crushed to a fine powder and chemically treated to separate the traces of uranium. To produce 1 ton of uranium oxide, or yellow cake, around 660 tons of rock is crushed and discarded.
It is State of It with Selwyn Manning, thanks to scoop.co.nz. Good morning to you, Selwyn.
Yeah, good morning, Glenn.
Good morning. So what is the state of it today?
Well, it's all about this, the Uranium container ship oil spill, Glenn, and how that's exposed New Zealand's lack of preparedness to tackle these problematic toxic accidents when they occur on our coastline and in our territorial waters. And as we discovered last night, New Zealand ports are being used to transport thousands of tonnes of Australian uranium, linking New Zealand to a nuclear power and nuclear weapons industries around the globe. Now, more on that later. Yeah, we'll certainly get into that later. But first, let's look at how prepared New Zealand is when things go wrong, Glenn. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, no New Zealander can be held accountable, responsible for the oil spill. But as the Prime Minister and our government are basically, and politicians are basically generally those who are responsible for developing policy and laws that make sure that we have a plan in place. Let's have a look at really how they've been stacking up over the last week, Glenn.
Okay.
First off, TVNZ's breakfast program, Corin Dan asked Greenpeace's Steve Abel how the government and the response workers were doing, and here's a bit of a clip on that.
Are you confident, I mean, as an NGO, an outside group watching, that the government, the authorities, the Selwyn, everybody is doing now everything they possibly can to get as much oil off that boat?
Look, I think a lot of people are working incredibly hard right now, and I would like to hope that they're doing the very best they can. I met one of the Selvers last night, and he seemed very adamant that they were going to do everything they could to get that oil off the boat. There will have to be questions asked at some point about whether we have done everything we could have, and I think that will happen down the track. I'm sure it will.
There's Steve Abel there from Greenpeace.
Yes, that's right. The question remains, as Steve Abel kind of put there, that the government's acted satisfactorily on this issue. Has it? And that question is out there. Many of the Kiwi FM listeners recognise Steve Abel for his fabulous music, but that aside,
indeed,
he's indicated that more of these questions are bound to be asked. So let's explore that. Let's just have a look at that. Thursday last week, interest.co.nz editor Bernard Hickey and I were asked a similar question while taking part on Citizen A on Stratos TV. And here's a bit of a clip to Bernard Hickey here.
Question to both of you. How would you rate out of 10 the government's response to date?
It seems slow. I'm less willing to put the boot in. I'd give it a 6 or a 7.
6 or a 7?
I would say a 4 because it's almost non-existent apart from a helicopter ride by the Prime Minister yesterday.
And that was Selwyn Manning there on what's the show there, on Stratos?
Yes, it was, yes. Now, as you heard, Bernard Hickey's response was that it appeared very slow, rather slow to get off the mark. That's certainly the impression that most people were getting when they were looking at it, analysing it last week. And I agreed with them, obviously, as you saw there. But exploring back, the government, it had been arguing on the matter and engaging on the matter in a sense already, and analysing its positioning from last week. It appeared the problem was that the government, once again, like we've raised on this program so many times, had been putting out mixed messages on this whole thing. So to just take, once again, I think it's really important to do a comparison of back then, so that we can get a sense of where we are now. And to take these two reports, now these are both, and I did this on purpose here, they're both from the New Zealand Herald, both reported on the same day, which was October 10th Northern Time, so it would be October 11th New Zealand time. This is a comparison between the Prime Minister John Key's message and that of his Transport Minister Stephen Joyce. But first, here's the Prime Minister's message, Glenn.
It's important. I mean, I did ask the question, what happens if the ship breaks up? The seals that they have there, they can apply to, because they get quite a lot of warning apparently, they can apply to the tanks, and even if it did sink, it's very unlikely that the oil would actually necessarily leach from that. In fact, it would be self-contained.
Okay, so he says unlikely to leak.
Yeah, exactly. Now, compare this to Stephen Joyce. This is on the same day in the same news organisation.
On the reef at the moment. is that we are getting a lot more oil, which means there'll be a lot more oil on the coast in the next 24 hours. When that ship hit the reef last week, there is every likelihood that we'll be dealing with the situation we're dealing with today, and we will be in the weeks ahead.
The audio there was a little bit shaky, but the general gist there was that he was playing the bad cop, right?
Yeah, that's right. Now, some may say, that on this kind of bulletin, the state of it, we're running a similar thing to what we pitched last week. But that's true, but only because there's this recurring theme, Glenn, that's emitting from the beehive, and that's where these mixed messages are coming out. Now, which one of those two politicians, the Prime Minister or Stephen Joyce, which one of them were right? And we know through the passage of the last week that certainly Joyce was right, and John Key, once again, was pushing a positive spin line that wasn't in tandem with reality here. Now, to be fair, as the Mad Butcher kind of coined that phrase, the comparison was from last week. So let's have a look at what the government has been, where it's been positioning this week. Since then, this issue was always going to have a political aspect to it. Labor and the Greens, they didn't miss any opportunity to create distance from National on this RENA issue. And here is the Labor leader, the Greens leader, and of course National coming in on this clip, Glenn.
There shouldn't be deep sea drilling until we know that there are safeguards in place that can absolutely be relied upon.
The Greens agree. They say the RENA spill is 1,700 tonnes of oil maximum. The deep sea well in the Gulf of Mexico gushed out a massive 627,000 tonnes.
This was a relatively small one. With deep sea drilling, you'd get a really big spill.
But the government says this is political opportunism, and any start to deep sea drilling is years away. And this is about a ship hitting a reef and cannot be compared to a spill from a rig.
I don't hear the Greens getting up saying we should stop having container ships coming to New Zealand.
And there is some confusion since that item went to air last week about what a moratorium is or isn't, or whether or not Gough is calling for a moratorium or a halt. But anyway, it's probably splitting hairs, I guess.
But certainly, Glenn, your good work in pushing, questions and hard questions to these politicians certainly came through, and your line on really questioning Gough on the moratorium, whether or not that was what they were going to do, is certainly getting some traction there.
I don't know, because last week was no, yes, and then Monday no, and then apparently again yesterday yes. Moratorium.
Yeah, so there you go. We've got mixed messages coming from the two main parties coming through. They're not staying online, not staying on message, and it's no wonder that the public kind of scratches their head and thinks, what's going on with our politicians on this? Yesterday, after the meeting with Tauranga's Chamber of Commerce, John Key, he said the government is not yet in a position to announce a financial aid package for businesses affected by the grounding of the RENA, and that there had been no request for that kind of compensation. But what Key was not telling people is there is a legal opinion that's developing at the moment that suggests that the Resource Management Act may provide recourse for the Crown to seek compensation from those who may be responsible for the spill, from companies that are basically responsible here for that RENA spill. Now, the irony of this fact is that the national government, of course, and its stakeholders have long sought the opportunity, the political opportunity, to scrap the RMA. But it might be the very law that basically gets the country out of a ditch here. That aside, the most disturbing fact that was revealed last night was from 3 News reporter Patrick Gower, and we led in on this, remember, with the uranium issue. Now, this exclusive report from Patrick Gower revealed that container ships carrying uranium dock at the port of Tauranga, where the RENA, around this area where the RENA problem occurred. And Gower announced that through 3 News that he had discovered that the Tauranga Port authorities were concerned as recently as last year that the government had no plan to deal with a radioactive spill. And here's Patrick Gower as he reported it last night, Glenn.
This is what's called yellowcake uranium, wanted by nuclear plants around the world and shipped through ports like Tauranga. It's low-level radioactive material, but the Prime Minister says, don't worry about it.
It's not something that people should be fearful of.
Yet documents obtained by 3 News show Tauranga Harbour authorities had plenty of concerns about uranium just last year. The Harbour Master warned it is not specified who would be responsible for cleaning up a uranium spill. There are no means of detecting radioactive materials in this port, and the Tauranga Fire Service does not have any specialised detection equipment. The harbour authorities from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council admitted today nothing has changed.
But don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. As Patrick Gower alluded to there, you know, this issue, it raises questions like, has the government ever had a plan to deal with toxic waste? Accidents and toxic waste of all kinds, you know, like the arena is showing us. Was there a plan there for New Zealand's, if such a thing occurred in New Zealand's territorial waters? And it appears categorically that there does not, you know, there is no plan in a sense to really address this type of thing. Should we be reassured by the Prime Minister and what he is saying here on this issue? Well, you know, let's once again do a comparison thing. And in closing, Glenn, have a look at the Prime Minister, what he was saying back in February 2010, so February last year, when it was found that he had shares in a uranium mining company in Australia. And here's the clip here, a 3 News one going back that time.
Kia ora, good evening. The Prime Minister says he will sell his shares in a company which mines for uranium. John Key had invested in an Australian gold mining company that since merged with a uranium mining company, but Key claims he didn't know. New Zealand's been nuclear free since the mid-1980s, and the opposition says Key should have made it his business to know what the company was doing. Adam Holland.
So that was back then.
Yeah, and just once again, looking at where we are now, it clearly is that New Zealand, it may still be able to claim that it's nuclear-free, Glenn, but it cannot, under this government, claim that it is uranium-free anymore, with hundreds of tonnes of uranium going through our thing. Now, this lack of preparedness is the big issue here. Here, you know, we have a country that is got a pristine natural coastline, a reputation, a country that does not have a regulatory framework to place and ensure rapid response to coastal and oceanic environmental accidents should they occur. It's a nation that doesn't even have the necessary hardware to deal with this issue on our coastline, let alone in deep sea kind of situations should those occur. We also have, you know, a nation that has a Prime Minister and a government that says it must weigh up the cost of environmental risks against the wider economic benefits. And just on that note, I think it's probably a good point to kind of ponder for the next week, Glenn.
And that, of course, is the state of it. Thank you very much, Selwyn Manning. And you can find this as a video up at scoop.co.nz.